The courtroom's oak panels gleamed under the weight of the cameras mounted like silent predators. There was a peculiar stillness to the air, the kind that settled right before a thunderstorm. Outside, crowds gathered behind police barricades, some holding phones high above their heads, others pressing homemade signs to the windows. "Justice for Justin," one read in bold red paint, the letters still dripping. Inside, however, all that buzz faded into a nervous silence. Shaw Diddy sat at the defendant's table, hands folded neatly over a navy folder, expression unreadable. He looked less like the man who once headlined a sold-out world tour and more like someone walking barefoot across broken glass. His diamond-studded cufflinks caught the light, betraying a glint of the persona he had built, the mogul, the myth. But today, that myth was on trial. Judge Evers cleared his throat and called the court to order, his voice slicing clean through the tension. "Let the record show that proceedings have resumed for the State vs. Shaw Diddy under docket number 2894JH, concerning charges of fraudulent financial concealment, misuse of fiduciary trusts, and willful withholding of paternity in violation of the California Family Transparency Act." The words, though legal and dry, carried a blade. Diddy jaw tightened slightly. His attorney leaned in, whispered something, but he didn't move. Not a nod, not a blink. The first witness called was Marcy Kay, a veteran journalist who had covered Diddy rise for nearly 2 decades. She stepped into the box like a woman used to delivering live news in hurricanes. Her voice was clear, practiced, but her eyes held something closer to sorrow than judgment. She recalled the night she first caught wind of a hidden heir, back in 2017, when she received a tip about a $75,000 tuition payment made under the alias J. Holmes by an entity known as Legacy Trust Holdings. At the time, she brushed it off as noise. But now, seated just meters from the man whose legend she'd once helped amplify, the pieces had formed a haunting picture. As Marcy stepped down, a shift occurred. It was subtle, like a stage cue only the cast could hear. The prosecutor stood and approached the judge. "Your Honor, the state now calls Justin Dorr Holmes to the stand." A ripple passed through the gallery. Phones were raised in vain, pens scratched paper faster. Even Diddy sat up straighter. From the courtroom side door, Justin appeared not of the child the rumors had often painted, but a composed young man in his late teens. His suit was slightly too large, as if he'd grown just enough to outpace his last fitting. But there was a quiet strength in the way he walked. No security, no PR team, just him, alone. As he raised his right hand and took the oath, a hush fell again. The judge nodded. "You may proceed." The prosecutor's voice softened. "Justin, thank you for being here today. Let's begin at the beginning. Can you tell us how you first came to know that Mr. Diddy was your father?" Justin's eyes didn't search the room. He stared straight ahead, voice calm but edged with something older than his years. "I was 11. My mom sat me down in our apartment after school. She handed me a letter with a gold wax seal. I thought it was from school at first, but inside, it was from him, my father." The room felt like it exhaled all at once. Even the stenographer hesitated a beat before catching up. Justin continued. It wasn't long, just 3 paragraphs. He said he had been watching from afar, that he loved me, that he had chosen not to be in my life publicly, but that he had always been nearby in spirit, that he was proud of me and would be there when the time was right. The prosecutor leaned forward. And how did that make you feel? Justin's jaw twitched, the first crack in his composure. Confused, angry, relieved. I'd asked my mom so many times why my dad wasn't around. She always told me he was protecting me. I didn't understand what that meant until I Googled his name the next day. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. The judge raised a hand, restoring quiet. Justin pressed on. I found everything. Concerts, red carpets, billion-dollar deals. And me? I was in a 2-bedroom walk-up in Inglewood sharing a bunk bed with my cousin. The prosecutor nodded. So, you were not aware of the financial support provided to you through the trust fund? Justin shook his head. Not at the time. I thought we were living paycheck to paycheck. I thought it was normal to wear the same sneakers for 3 years. Did you later come to learn about Legacy Trust Holdings? Yes. When I turned 16, my mom let me see the statements. They'd been managed by a law firm out of Delaware. Payments for school, medical bills, even birthday gifts, all tracked, labeled. It was organized, almost clinical. And how did that affect your relationship with Mr. Diddy Combe? Justin paused. It made it transactional, like I was a file to be maintained, not a son to be raised. Diddy Comb's eyes flickered down at the table. He did not speak. His attorney scribbled something and slid the note toward him. He didn't read it. The prosecutor stepped back, giving space. Tell us, Justin, did you ever meet him in person before today? Yes, twice. The courtroom stiffened. The first time, he arranged to meet me at a library in Silver Lake. He wore a hoodie, sat in the corner by the encyclopedias. He had this way of looking at me like he was seeing a memory instead of a person. He didn't say much, just that he hoped I wasn't mad, that he wanted to see who I was becoming. He gave me a book, The Alchemist, and left. And the second time? Justin inhaled slowly. He came to my piano recital last year. I didn't know at first, but when I was done, I saw him near the fire exit, clapping with his head down. He didn't come over. He just left a bouquet of white lilies with a card that said, "You made the stars jealous tonight. Love, Dad." I kept the card. I still have it. The gallery shifted, some dabbing their eyes, others shaking their heads. The story was beautiful and painful and complicated, like family often is. The prosecutor turned to the judge. Your Honor, with permission, we'd like to submit the original card as Exhibit JDC-A. Granted, the judge said. The clerk moved forward, gloved hands receiving the artifact of a love both hidden and raw. As Justin stepped down from the witness stand, Diddy Combe rose slowly from his seat. For a moment, the court waited, expecting an objection, a legal interruption, a dramatic outburst. Instead, the famed artist known for lyrics that shaped a generation spoke with the tremor of a father unmasked. Justin, he said, barely above a whisper, I never stopped thinking about you. I just didn't know how to step into your world without dragging mine with me. Justin didn't reply, but he didn't look away either. The judge cleared his throat. That's enough, Mr. Diddy Combe. You'll have your turn. But the words had been said, the look exchanged. And everyone in that room, from the stenographer to the spectators clinging to every syllable, knew that this case was no longer just about money or secrecy. It was about what makes someone a father, not blood, not bank accounts, but the ability to show up. And the devastating cost when you don't. As the court adjourned for recess, reporters rushed from the room like birds startled from wire. But in the quiet that remained, father and son sat 20 feet apart, bound not by judgment or evidence, but by a history that had just begun to unravel. The rain had started sometime during the recess, not loud but steady, a rhythmic tapping against the tall windows of the courthouse like time quietly knocking. Inside, the air had changed, less electric, more weighted. The spectators filtered back into the room, damp umbrellas folded and leaned against chairs, whispers trailing like smoke between the rows. Shaw Diddy remained seated at the defense table, unmoved, hands clasped again, but this time his fingers trembled slightly with each passing minute. His attorney leaned in and asked if he needed a break, but Diddy shook his head, his jaw tight, his eyes locked not on the jury or the judge but the now empty witness stand where his son had just sat an hour ago. The judge re-entered, dry as if the rain refused to touch him, and gavelled the court back into session. "Counsel," he said evenly, "you may proceed." The prosecutor adjusted his notes and stood, but this time he didn't call for a witness. Instead, he turned and addressed the court directly. "Your Honor, we ask to introduce audio recordings as Exhibit JDCB voicemails left by Mr. Diddy on a secured device recovered with consent from Justin Dorr Holmes." A flicker passed through Diddy expression, but it disappeared quickly. The judge nodded. "Proceed." The first message began to play, the court speaker crackling for a moment before resolving into a deep, familiar voice. "Justin, hey, it's me. I don't know if you'll ever listen to these, but I wanted to talk. No press, no lawyers, just me. I saw the photo your mom posted last week. You looked grown, like a man. I missed your birthday again, I know. I sent something, but it's not the same. I know that too." A pause. "I just keep thinking about the last time I saw you. That piano recital. You didn't know I was there, but I was. I was proud of you. You should know that." The audio clicked off. In the gallery, a few people dabbed their eyes. The next recording was shorter, shakier. "I don't blame you if you hate me. I really don't. But I never stopped trying. I just didn't want the tabloids chewing you up. I thought staying out of your life was the same as protecting it. But maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was just scared." The judge instructed the clerk to log the recordings and then nodded to the prosecution to proceed with the next witness. "We now call to the stand Dr. Yvonne Hale, child psychologist and family development consultant." A slender woman in her 50s with graying curls and calm eyes stepped forward. Her voice was soft but carried, like a lullaby that knew it had to survive in a courtroom. She explained that she had reviewed Justin's academic records, early emotional assessments, and more recently conducted a private evaluation session. "Justin exhibits strong resilience markers," she began, "but there are deep indicators of emotional compartmentalization, especially related to attachment and identity formation." The prosecutor asked her to elaborate. "Children who grow up knowing they are hidden, even if provided for, often internalize shame without understanding its source. Justin did not lack financial support, but he lacked emotional visibility. That has long-term implications. Could you assess whether Mr. Diddy actions were harmful?" "Intent matters," she said gently, "but so do outcomes. Justin has had to construct a version of himself in isolation, one that both acknowledges and erases his father. That internal contradiction is not sustainable." At the defense table, Diddy inhaled slowly. His attorney scribbled something again, but he didn't look down. His gaze was locked on the expert witness, as if her words were peeling open a truth he'd long kept folded shut. "In your professional opinion, The prosecutor continued. Has Justin experienced neglect? Not in the traditional sense, she replied. But in a relational sense, yes. He has grown up knowing that his presence was not meant to be seen. That kind of invisibility leaves scars even wealth cannot heal. As Dr. Hale stepped down, the defense rose to call their first witness. Your Honor, he began, we call Mr. Alan Rousseau, Executive Director of the Legacy Trust Consortium. A heavy-set man in a tailored charcoal suit approached the stand. He carried a briefcase, which, when opened, revealed thick binders sealed with official stamps. Mr. Rousseau, the defense began, can you clarify the nature of the trust used to provide for Justin Dior Homes? Rousseau nodded. The legacy trust in question was legally established under Delaware statutes. The beneficiary was listed anonymously for protection purposes, and all disbursements were within lawful and ethical parameters. Were there any unusual activities that would suggest misuse? None, Rousseau replied confidently. In fact, the distributions were conservative. Education, health care, basic living, all documented. The defense then showed the court a timeline of payments, cross-referenced with school enrollment dates and tuition deadlines. You're suggesting that Mr. Diddy Combs' intentions were consistent with providing stability, not secrecy. Correct, Rousseau confirmed. Our office manages hundreds of high-profile clients. Anonymity is often the first line of protection, not deception. The prosecutor stood for cross-examination. Mr. Rousseau, are you aware of 3 separate emergency disbursements categorized as public relations mitigation? Rousseau stiffened. Yes, those were labeled by administrative staff during a staff turnover. The language was imprecise. So there were emergency payments made during times of media speculation. Yes, but not directly linked to Mr. Diddy Comb. The trust permitted discretionary action. The prosecutor nodded, then turned to the jury. Discretion, yes, but when discretion veils reality, at what point does it become distortion? The witness was dismissed, but the seed had been planted. As the court recessed for lunch, the gallery emptied slowly, their expressions caught between sympathy and suspicion. In the hallway, reporters whispered into phones while TV crews positioned themselves for the next update. Diddy Comb remained inside the courtroom, unmoving. His attorney excused himself for a break, but he stayed behind, staring at the grain of the defense table as if it might reveal an answer he couldn't find anywhere else. Then the doors creaked open again. It was Justin, alone. Without prompting, he walked up to the table and sat across from his father, both of them flanked by silence. Diddy Comb looked up, his voice barely audible. You didn't have to come back in here. I did, Justin said. I had to see the person, not the headlines. Diddy Comb exhaled like someone letting go of years. I thought I was doing the right thing. Justin's voice was steady. You were doing the safe thing. That's not always the same. I didn't want the world to chew you up. But you forgot something, Justin said quietly. I wasn't asking the world to see me. I just needed my father to. And with that, he stood, straightened his jacket, and walked back toward the rear doors. But before leaving, he turned once more. They'll ask about letters, about recordings. They'll analyze everything. But they won't see that moment. That's just between us. The door shut softly behind him, and Diddy Comb was left sitting in the echo, no longer just a man on trial, but a father learning, too late, what presence really means. Outside, the rain had stopped. The sky had cleared. But inside, the reckoning was only just beginning. By the time the courtroom reconvened, the world outside had changed. Headlines were already spinning, tweets dissecting every syllable of Justin's testimony, live streams replaying his confrontation with his father on loop. But inside, time slowed again. The courtroom remained its own universe still, deliberate and aching with the weight of words already spoken, and the truth still poised to emerge. Judge Avers resumed his seat with a quiet nod, and the prosecutor rose again, this time holding a thick binder with red tabs sprouting like flags. "Your Honor," he said, "we now introduce Exhibit JDC-4, a collection of internal communications between Mr. Diddy Combs' public relations firm and the Trust's financial administrators during the period from 2016 to 2020. The judge raised an eyebrow slightly but gestured for the clerk to proceed. Copies were distributed. On the gallery benches, reporters leaned forward like predators scenting blood. "Within these communications," the prosecutor continued, "are multiple instances where the trust meant solely for Justin Dorr Holmes was used as leverage in planned media releases and public narrative adjustments." He flipped to a page and read aloud. From email dated April 3, 2018, subject line, upcoming Spotlight article. Quote, "Ensure funds are wired to JD's education account by Thursday. Optics matter when the article drops. Add the STEM scholarship blurb to the wire memo for plausible visibility." A low ripple moved through the room like wind beneath a locked door. Diddy Combs' attorney objected, citing relevance, but the judge overruled. "The court will hear this." The prosecutor moved methodically. In total, 5 such emails were uncovered, each coordinating trust activity with scheduled press releases, promotional interviews, or tour launches. Mr. Diddy Comb was copied on all of them. His assistant confirmed receipt via read receipts logged by the firm's system. He turned to the chart now projected behind him, a timeline where red dots marked major media events and blue dots marked trust activity. The patterns are unmistakable. The trust, while structured to provide support for a minor, was used not only as a financial vehicle but a public relations buffer. And, if the jury will note, these distributions increased in frequency during periods of rising speculation regarding Mr. Diddy Combs' paternity status. The defense rose again, this time to present a counter-exhibit, Exhibit D-19, featuring a notarized affidavit from the Trust's legal counsel stating that all payments were authorized and fell within the scope of a trust management. Yes, the defense argued, there were correspondences, but context matters. When you're the most recognizable man in entertainment, everything becomes intertwined privacy, image, legacy. The question is not whether these payments occurred, but whether they were illegal or malicious, and we maintain they were neither. The prosecutor's reply was immediate. Perhaps not malicious, but manipulative? Absolutely. The child in this equation became an accessory to reputation management. That has consequences. The judge allowed both exhibits into the record, and the gallery whispered, papers rustled, and the weight of the evidence settled like a cloud. Then, in an unexpected move, the prosecutor called to the stand a figure known to few in the room but critical to the case's moral spine, Mrs. Lorraine Holmes, Justin's mother. The courtroom door opened slowly, and a woman in her mid-40s stepped through, dressed simply, face composed but pale. She walked like someone who had spent years trying not to draw attention but now could no longer avoid it. Taking the oath, she sat, hands folded tightly in her lap. Mrs. Holmes, the prosecutor began, we know you've avoided publicity. Thank you for being here. She nodded once. I'm here for my son. Her voice was low but firm. Can you describe your understanding of the financial support provided to Justin through the trust? It was always through a middleman. I was told not to contact Sean directly. Payments arrived on time, sometimes gifts, always anonymous, until Justin turned 16 and I showed him the documents. Did you and Mr. Diddy ever discuss publicly acknowledging Justin? She hesitated. Yes, once. In 2015. I asked if he would ever consider it. He said, the world eats soft boys alive, Lorraine. I'm keeping him off the menu. I didn't agree, but I also didn't want to fight. I wanted Justin safe. Safe, the prosecutor repeated. But at what cost? She swallowed. At the cost of presence, and eventually at the cost of peace. The courtroom held its breath. Did Justin ever ask about his father? Every birthday, she whispered, especially the ones when no call came. And the gallery quieted to a silence so deep the rain on the windows outside could be heard once again. Why did you allow the secrecy to continue? Because part of me hoped one day he'd change his mind, that Sean would show up, not in a hoodie behind a curtain, but as a father in the daylight. The prosecutor thanked her and stepped aside. The defense declined cross-examination. When Lorraine stepped down, she looked not at Diddy but at her son, seated just behind the prosecution. Their eyes met, and in that glance was an entire childhood of silence, patience, and hidden hope. The judge took a deep breath. This court will take a 15-minute recess before closing arguments. As the room emptied again, the tension thickened. But something else had shifted too. In the span of a day, Shaw Diddy had gone from legend to man, from untouchable icon to a figure dissected under fluorescent courtroom lights. And Justin, once a rumor, now stood unshaken in truth. In the hallway, journalists scrambled to update leads, fans debated in real time online, and a world that had once devoured Diddy music now confronted the quieter, deeper song he had never released, the complicated ballad of a father and the son he hid. Back inside the courtroom, the recess ended, and the jury filed in slowly, faces unreadable. The judge returned to the bench and adjusted his robe. The prosecutor stood one final time, papers in hand, but voice unshaken. Members of the jury, he said, we are not here to vilify a man for loving his son. We are here to determine whether that love was expressed through truth or concealed beneath control. You've heard from the son. You've read the letters. You've seen the patterns. Now it's your turn to decide, when does protection become erasure? And can a father's silence ever truly be for the child's sake or just his own? He returned to his seat. The gallery buzzed in murmurs. The judge prepared to instruct the jury. But just before he did, Justin stood again. Quietly, deliberately. He held a small envelope. Your Honor, he said, with your permission, I'd like to read one final note, a personal one. The judge looked to the attorneys. Neither objected. The judge nodded. Justin opened the envelope and unfolded the paper. His voice was clear. This was written the night before the trial began. I found it in my locker at school. He paused. It said, Justin, I don't know how this will go. Maybe they'll tear me apart. Maybe I deserve it. But if they do, let it be for what I failed to say. You are not a rumor. You are not a secret. You are my son. And I am sorry I waited this long to say it in a room full of people. The room froze. Justin folded the letter and placed it on the clerk's table. "That's the only truth I came for." And with that, he returned to his seat. The judge inhaled and began his instructions, but the verdict, in many hearts, had already begun to form. The jury room door shut with a dull thud, and with it, a silence descended across the courtroom like fog creeping in at dusk. The gallery slowly exhaled, a breath held too long. Reporters scribbled final notes before sprinting to transmit the moment. Shaw Diddycombe remained seated at the defense table, motionless, a man known for spectacle now reduced to stillness. His suit, tailored to perfection, wrinkled slightly at the elbows, his diamond cufflinks no longer glittering with bravado, but with a quiet weight. Justin sat a few rows behind, no longer guarded by lawyers or statements, but by the simple truth of his presence. For once, there were no cameras, no stylists, no entourage, just a boy, a man, and the chasm that still separated them, despite everything that had been spoken. Judge Evers cleared his throat and called for a brief recess while the jury deliberated, though everyone in the room knew the next word spoken would not belong to law or fame, but to legacy. The room thinned. Some stepped out to get air. Others refreshed news feeds as online polls began to tally public opinion faster than any courtroom could. But neither Diddycombe nor Justin moved. A security guard, unnoticed until now, shifted awkwardly and asked if Justin would like water. He declined with a polite shake of the head, eyes still forward. Across from him, Diddycombe leaned back slowly, eyes tracing the lines in the ceiling as if searching for a note that had once made a song whole. When the bailiff reappeared 40 minutes later, the courtroom repopulated swiftly, a low hum of expectation crackling through the air. The jury filed in, 12 solemn faces now bearing the burden of truth. Judge Evers re-entered last, gavel in hand. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "have you reached a verdict?" The foreperson stood, voice steady but hoarse. "We have, Your Honor." The judge nodded. "Please proceed." A sheet was passed forward, hands trembling only slightly. The clerk read aloud. "On the charge of fiduciary misrepresentation, we find the defendant not guilty. On the charge of intentional concealment of familial identity in violation of the Family Transparency Act, guilty." A gasp echoed through the gallery. The judge raised a hand for order. Justin didn't flinch. Diddycombe exhaled slowly, eyes lowering, not in protest but in resignation. "Given the verdict," the judge continued, "sentencing will be scheduled for a future date. However, this court acknowledges the emotional gravity of this case. This is not simply a matter of legal failure, but a reflection of broken trust, of silence substituted for love. The law cannot repair a family, but it can demand honesty moving forward." He paused, gaze sweeping the room. "Court is adjourned." The gavel fell with finality, and just like that, the trial was over. Reporters surged for the exits. Phones buzzed to life. Outside, helicopters resumed their low, circling vigil. But inside, it was Justin who stood first. Not rushing, not triumphant, just steady. He walked past the press bench, past the defense table, and paused beside the man who had once signed every letter as Dad, but never spoken the word aloud in daylight. Diddycombe looked up. The silence stretched between them again, but this time it was different. Not avoidance, not performance, just presence. "I didn't come here to destroy you," Justin said quietly, voice low enough that only Diddycombe could hear. "I came here to find you." The older man nodded slowly, throat tightening. "And did you?" Justin's jaw flexed. "I think I'm still looking, but at least now I know where not to search." For the first time in days, Diddy smiled not wide, not bold, but honest. "Then maybe I can stop hiding." "Maybe," Justin replied, "but it's not about you anymore. It never really was." And with that, he walked past him and out through the courtroom doors. The cameras swarmed instantly, but Justin didn't stop to speak. He slipped through the noise like mist, neither chasing redemption nor running from it. Just walking. Diddy remained in his seat for a while, long after the gallery had emptied and the lights began to dim. Only his attorney remained, speaking in soft legal tones about next steps, appeal strategies, sentence reductions. But Diddy barely heard him. His eyes were on the folded letter in his pocket, the one he'd written the night before trial, the one Justin had read aloud for the world. He took it out again, ran a finger over the words in his own handwriting. "You are not a rumor. You are my son." He had once written songs that made millions dance, lines that defined summers, hooks that crowned charts. But this was the line that would define him. Weeks later, sentencing day arrived. The judge issued a suspended sentence, community service, and mandatory family mediation, a legal term that sounded almost laughable in the face of what still hung unspoken between them. But in the back row, Justin was there. Not smiling, not frowning, just there. And Diddy saw it. He stepped forward, didn't speak to the cameras, didn't wave to the fans. He simply walked off the stage and toward his son. No longer in hiding, no longer in control, just a man starting again. As they exited the courthouse, the cameras flashed. Headlines drafted themselves, and the world rushed to declare a verdict of its own. But the real story was this. Amid fame and silence, money and memory, a father finally stood in the daylight, not because he had been forced, but because a son had dared to ask. Not for fortune, not for fame, but simply for the truth.